Question, Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for granting this urgent question. My constituents had the devastating news that the Roman Way Hotel in my... sorry. On the urgent question on asylum seeker hotels.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government inherited an asylum system under unprecedented strain, with many thousands stuck in a backlog without their asylum claims processed. The Home Secretary has taken immediate action to restart asylum processing and scrap the unworkable Rwanda policy, which will save an estimated £4 billion for the taxpayer over the next 2 years. We remain absolutely committed to ending the use of hotels for asylum seekers and continue to identify a range of accommodation options to minimise the use of hotels and ensure better use of public money, whilst maintaining sufficient accommodation to meet demand. In accordance with the Immigration and Asylum Act 1999, the Home Office has a statutory obligation to provide destitute asylum seekers with accommodation and subsistence report whilst their application for asylum is being considered. We're committed to ensuring that destitute asylum seekers are housed in safe, secure and suitable accommodation, and that they're treated with dignity while their asylum claim is considered. We continue to work closely with local authorities and key stakeholders, building on lessons learned in terms of asylum accommodation, stand-up and management. Hotels are not a permanent solution, but a necessary temporary step in keeping the system under control and ensuring it does not descend into chaos. We will restore order to the asylum system so it operates swiftly, firmly and fairly. As we progress with this, it's right that we deliver on our legal responsibilities and ensure people aren't left destitute. Ultimately, Madam Deputy Speaker, we'll be able to tackle irregular migration and bring the cost of the system down by billions of pounds. It remains our ambition to exit hotels. However, in the nearest future, they remain key to delivering on our legal responsibilities and ensuring people aren't left destitute.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I just record my appreciation for getting this urgent question. My constituents had the devastating news that the Roman Way Hotel in my constituency was going to be stood up to be housing asylum seekers. This was after it had been closed last year. This has a significant impact, not just on my constituents, but also in Cannock as well. And, of course, what we have seen so far this year and since the party opposite came to power is 19,326 people who've crossed the channel since the party opposite came into power. And this is 19% up on the same period last year. And this is all in the context of a pledge by the party opposite in the manifesto in July to end asylum hotels. So you can imagine the devastation that so many constituents and constituents across the country are feeling when they're seeing hotels being brought back into use, breaking a manifesto pledge from the party opposite. And it is a total lack of transparency. There isn't consultation with local authorities. It's a diktat that they receive with no support and no help. And it's only been exposed by news organisations such as GB News that are shining a light onto this. So will the Minister provide a list to the House of Commons detailing all the hotels that have been stepped up to provide accommodation for asylum seekers since they came to power, and will they commit to continuing to update that list? What is the estimated cost of reopening these hotels? What has changed so drastically that has caused the Labour Party to abandon a manifesto pledge so quickly? Considering that there is a correlation between the removal of the deterrent effect that our party had in place and a rise in crossings, what will the government do to provide a credible deterrent going forward? And finally, will the Minister commit to cease using the Roman Way Hotel in my constituency? And will she also commit to not putting the Hatherton House Hotel in Penkridge into use?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We inherited, as the Right Honourable Gentleman knows, because he was a senior member of the last few administrations, an asylum system that had been ground to a standstill by the last government's pursuit of the Rwanda policy, which was doomed to failure. They spent £700 million over 2 years to send 4 volunteers to Rwanda. He may, and members of the party opposite do claim that the Rwanda scheme was somehow a deterrent, but from when the day it was announced to the day it was scrapped, 83,500 people crossed the channel in small boats. If that's the definition of a deterrent, then I think the Honourable Gentleman needs to look it up in the dictionary. He asks. Well, the Right Honourable Gentleman talks about an increase of 19% in channel boat crossings since Labour came to power, but the first 6 months of this year, when the Rwanda scheme was full, up and running, and apparently about to start any minute, there was an 18% increase in channel crossings. Again, the Rwanda scheme was an expensive distraction. It was not a deterrent. The Right Honourable Gentleman asks if we will name and produce a list of hotels that are currently in use. He will know that when he was in the government and when the previous Tory government were in power, hotel use peaked at over 400. I can tell him there are currently 220 hotels in use. At the time of the election, there were 213 hotels in use, but since July, 7 hotels have shut and 14 have opened, which has created a net increase of 7.
Shaun Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't know. I congratulate the Right Honourable Member for securing this question. Under the last Conservative government, when the current Shadow Home Secretary was in the Home Office, 2 hotels in my constituency was opened. No notification to the local authority. No consultation. This is another example of the party opposite crying over the mess that they made and the attempts that this government are trying to do to clear it up. Does my Right Honourable friend, the Minister, agree with me that we will smash the criminal gangs and we'll stop those channel crossings coming over? And the carping from the party opposite really does demonstrate they've learnt nothing since the election defeat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly agree with my honourable friend that we inherited a system that was at a standstill, where 90,000 cases involving 116,000 people were stuck in a backlog which the law would not allow them to be processed in. We have restarted processing. We're gearing up the asylum system so that we can get throughput through the system and ultimately exit from hotels into a much more cost-effective system. And I agree with my honourable friend that carping from the party opposite, who created the backlogs and the mess that we are having to deal with, comes a bit rich.
Shadow Minister Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, can I congratulate my right honourable friend, the member for Stone, for securing this urgent question. He is absolutely right to raise this issue. As he said, the party opposite, Labour, promised in their manifesto to end the use of hotels. And yet the Minister has just admitted at the dispatch box, far from ending the use of hotels, they are in fact opening up even more. 14, she just admitted. Perhaps it should come as no surprise now that once again the Labour Party are doing the precise opposite of what they promised in their manifesto. Now, in government, the Conservatives were in fact closing down hotels. I luckily have the figures in front of me. Between September of last year and June the 30th of this year, the number of people in contingency accommodation, which is Home Office speak for hotels, went down by 47%. It went down, and yet under this new government it is going up. So will the Honourable Lady tell the House, she's told us how many hotels have opened up, will she tell us how many extra people are now in contingency accommodation compared to July the 4th? And will she also commit to always notifying in advance, at least 2 weeks in advance, members of Parliament if a hotel will open in their constituency? Now, we all know what the cause of this problem is. It is the illegal and dangerous crossings across the English Channel. Now, I'm afraid the position has actually got even worse since the figures my right honourable friend have quoted. Since the election, 19,988 people have crossed. That is a 23% increase on the same period last year, and it is a 66% increase on the same period immediately before the general election. So why have these numbers, crossing the Channel illegally, gone up? Well, the National Crime Agency have told us you need a deterrent. You can't police your way out of this. Even Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, has said we should look at offshore, European member states should look at offshore processing. We saw a deterrent work in Australia, and yet they scrapped the Rwanda deterrent before it had even started. The first flight hadn't taken off, and that is why the deterrent effect hadn't commenced. So will she follow Ursula von der Leyen's advice? Will she emulate the Australians and reinstate the scheme?
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. That was quite a rant, and it made certain assumptions that are completely untrue. First, that the Rwanda scheme would have worked. We already know it cost £700 million to send 4 volunteers to Rwanda. The party opposite were planning to spend £175,000 per person sent to Rwanda, and they hadn't managed to get anyone sent to Rwanda. Madam Deputy Speaker, had they put aside the money going into billions of pounds to pay this £175,000 per person sent to Rwanda? No, they hadn't. No money was set aside, and what we inherited was a system where no processing was going on, where less than 1,000 asylum cases a month were being processed. We are now processing up to 10,000 asylum cases a month, but the right honourable gentleman knows, because he was a Home Office minister, that there are backlogs and lags between the first decision in processing and all the potential appeals. We cannot exit people from the asylum estate until they've got a final decision, and we inherited 2-year-plus backlogs in the tribunal system because they didn't fund them properly. We have, in the last period, returned nearly 10,000 people, which is nearly a 20% increase on the numbers that were returned last year. We are working on making the asylum system fit for purpose. We inherited an unholy mess from the party opposite.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I know that this government understands that using hotels to house asylum seekers is bad for communities, bad for the taxpayer, and ultimately bad for those themselves seeking asylum. And whilst those on the benches opposite who broke our asylum system wash their hands of the consequences now, can the Minister outline the progress the government is making on clearing the backlog that they created so we can stand down hotels, including by prioritising the processing of those housed at the Cresta Court Hotel in my constituency?
Deputy Speaker, we are prioritising getting the system up and running again so we can have throughput through our estate, our asylum accommodation estate. The fact that the system had ground to a complete halt, that there were 90,000 unprocessed cases in that system, when we came into government has meant that there are lags and delays in getting it up and running. I've just explained to the House that we've gone from making 1,000 asylum decisions a month to 10,000. The system is beginning to get flow through, and as that flow through happens, we will exit from hotels. We've had to have a small increase. We've been in power for 4 months. The manifesto did not say we would end use of hotels in 4 months. The party opposite, when they were in power, had at the height of their use of hotels, over 400 hotels in use. And I can tell you, Madam Deputy Speaker, they didn't give any MP 2-week notice that they were opening them.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. While an asylum seeker waits months or even years in a hotel for a decision on their claim, they are trapped in limbo. They are unable to work and they are forced to depend on government funds. This benefits absolutely no one. Not the asylum seekers who want to get on and start rebuilding their lives, and not the taxpayers who are footing the bill. And that's before I even mention our local councils who are left to pick up the pieces. To end the use of these hotels, tackling the backlog that ballooned under the previous government's watch must be part of the solution. But we can also reduce the demand for government accommodation by allowing asylum seekers to support themselves and contribute to the economy, something the Home Office itself has recognised will not ask as a pull factor for asylum seekers. So will the Minister finally scrap the ban on asylum seekers working, paying their fair share as doctors or dentists, if they have been waiting 3 months or longer for a decision on their claim? And will she commit to providing local councils with the resources they need, both funding and clear guidance, to provide proper support for asylum seekers and the local communities hosting these hotels?
Well said.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't agree with the Honourable Lady that allowing asylum seekers to work while the system is their claim is being considered will not be a pull factor. The way to deal with this issue is to have a fast, fair and efficient asylum system. We're looking at how we can redesign it, Madam Deputy Speaker, but we are also looking at what we can do to deal with the huge backlogs that we've inherited, not least in the tribunal system when there are appeals. We have to have a much better end-to-end system which is fair and efficient. That will mitigate any of the issues that the Honourable Lady has raised with respect to being allowed to work, because the fact is that if that restriction were to be lifted, I believe that that would be a huge pull factor and it would have potentially serious consequences.
Chris Murray.
I congratulate the member for securing this important debate. It's something the Home Affairs Committee is looking at, but I'm astonished he wants to draw attention to the Conservative legacy in this area. In 2019-20, the Home Office was spending £17,000 per asylum seeker per year on accommodation. By 2023-24, they were spending £47,000 per asylum seeker per year. And at that point, they stopped taking decisions. So the number could only grow as the UK taxpayer paid for them to stay in hotel accommodation at our expense. Now, does the Minister agree with me that the correct way to deal with this is to seriously address the systemic problems in the immigration system, such as the lack of any decisions being taken, and not ridiculous gimmicks like wave machines and deterrents for 4 people?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do agree that it is doing the day job effectively and efficiently, and if it can't be done effectively and efficiently, to redesign it so it can, rather than having huge rows with the international community threatening to leave the ECHR, setting up a parallel scheme that was not agreed by anybody, which spent vast amounts of money and ground the system to a halt. That is not the way to achieve success in this area, and I think considering a wave machine to send the boats somehow back to France just about sums up the reality of their attitude to what is a difficult situation.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister is pledged to smash the gangs. The Minister appears to be very confident in her position. So can she tell the House which metric we should use to judge whether the gangs have been smashed and the Channel crossings ended, and by what date?
Deputy Speaker, the party opposite allowed... I will answer in my own way. Madam Deputy Speaker, the party opposite allowed Channel crossings to be industrialised. Yeah. We are now facing a very sophisticated set of international supply chains which need international cooperation to be taken down and disrupted. We've established the Border Security Command. We've announced the investment of £150 million. We're having 100 additional investigators looking at this. We managed to achieve a very significant arrest of an offender just the other week. And we will see this begin to degrade the capacity of these international organised criminal gangs to smuggle people into our shores. The Honourable Gentleman will see when these numbers start to go down like the rest of us do.
Dan Carden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for her answers? She has inherited an incredible mess where it's reported £3.6 billion of overseas aid will be spent on refugees and asylum seekers in this country this year. Could I also say that simply ending the use of hotels will not solve some of the problems that the system is causing in our communities? A lot of the private providers of asylum accommodation buy up properties in the most deprived parts of cities. And I think the biggest challenge the government has is to rebuild trust with the public. And I'd ask her to consider the difference between the Homes for Ukraine system of housing people and the system of allowing big corporate profiteering companies to house asylum seekers, and to think how we involve civil society and our communities in the way we respond to the needs of asylum seekers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend ought to be comforted, I hope, that I'm thinking precisely of those things.
Julian Lewis.
I don't envy the right honourable lady in her job. Does she agree that no amount of hotel accommodation will ever suffice as long as there is no effective way of preventing very large numbers of people coming into this country without permission? And as I believe that a form of interception near the French coast is probably the only thing that will be a deterrent, will she at least keep open the possibility of negotiations with France as to how we could work together to do that?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a relatively new government in France just bedding in, and I can reassure the right honourable gentleman that we are working very closely with them to see how we can strengthen and deepen our cooperation and partnership.
Mike Tapp.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the right honourable member opposite who raised this urgent question appears to be suffering from some memory loss. It was under the Conservative government that we saw 130,000 small boat crossings, record high backlogs in the Home Office. It was the Conservatives that opened 400 hotels. That's 21,000 places, costing £8 million per day to the taxpayer. Does the Minister recall the Right Honourable Minister raising this under the previous government?
No, I don't. And I also notice in the revelations, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the weekend about why the party opposite decided to call the election earlier than perhaps some of us thought was going to be the case. One of the reasons in Tim Shipman's book Out was, and I'm quoting, that there was illegal migration as a problem, with a new armada of small boats predicted and the issue of whether they'd be able to get a repatriation flight off to Rwanda in the air before polling day. They evidently decided they couldn't, and they've now set out this complete fiction we're hearing from the opposite benches, that somehow the Rwanda scheme was just about to work before we scrapped it, when they'd spent £700 million in an increasingly futile and ridiculous attempt to get the Rwanda scheme off the ground.
Pete Wishart.
Speaker, here we go again with this new Labour government simply copying and aping the failed and disastrous policies of the Conservative government when it comes to hotel accommodation, whilst engaging in this grotesque competition with them to see who could sound the hardest when it comes to asylum seekers. Why not be bold and imaginative? Many of these asylum seekers are highly educated with skills that could be deployed in communities up and down the United Kingdom. That ridiculous answer she gave to the Democrats about being a pool to asylum seekers is simply nonsense, and she knows that with the tens of thousands that are coming on our shores just now. Why not get them usefully employed instead of leaving them to rot in these hotels across the UK?
We certainly want those who gain status be usefully employed, and my part of the system is making sure that we get those asylum decisions up and running as fast as possible. Unfortunately, we've inherited a very, very difficult situation, which we are working hard to resolve. Once someone has gained that asylum in this country, of course, they're able to work, and so we've got to get the system working faster.
Gareth Snell.
Much. Madam Deputy Speaker, I do find my constituency has two hotels. It had two hotels opened under the previous Conservative government. The two hotels are still there, so I do find the new concern from the members opposite slightly disconcerting, and I accept what the honourable gentleman from West Suffolk says. This is now the problem of this government. But I'm certain it's not a legacy they want to defend publicly, because the legacy is appalling. So a little less from them. The question I'd like to put to the Minister, yes, because that's how it works. And you ask a question, wait for an answer. The Shadow Home Secretary can keep quiet. The schools in my constituency that have some of the children who go to the hotels have said that accessing the hotels for educational welfare visits or safeguarding checks is proving more and more difficult because of the providers not understanding their responsibility. So could I encourage the Minister to speak to her counterparts in the Education Department and the Department of Local Government to ensure that those checks that are necessary to keep children safe are able to be done unimpeded?
Deputy Speaker, since we came into government, we have done much more to cooperate across departments, and I'll certainly take that issue up with my opposite numbers in the Department for Education and MHCLG.
Gregory Campbell.
Speaker, there are two hotels in my constituency in East Londonderry used at the moment, and we have problems enough at the moment trying to provide good quality hotel provision given the open coming next year to Royal Portrush. We need to see a gradual, continuous reduction in hotel accommodation being used for this purpose. Can the Minister address that and try to show some sense of direction as when we might see that achieved?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we have taken to processing asylum claims, which were at a standstill when we came into government, not least those that are extant in Northern Ireland, and I hope that that will lead to a process where we can get some throughput through the system and begin to exit hotels.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Minister informing the House today that return figures are now nearly 10,000. That's 1,000 up from last week. And what my constituents want to know, Madam Deputy Speaker, how are we moving faster so that we can return even faster than what we are doing now?
Deputy Speaker, it's important for the integrity of any system of asylum that if you do not get granted asylum, then you recognise that you don't have the right to stay in this country and hopefully leave voluntarily, or if not, be removed. Immigration enforcement, which operates out of the Home Office, is very focused on increasing the total number of returns, and as I said earlier, they're at 19% on the same period last year, and we intend to double down and carry on.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Boston and Skegness, we want these hotels used by asylum seekers to stop, as is the case across the country. 20 years ago, under the previous Labour government, processes and applications were dealt with within 3 to 4 weeks, including appeals, and only about 20% of applications were granted asylum. When will the Minister and the Home Office get back to the sensible, workmanlike processes that worked 20 years ago?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we are working on it, but as the honourable gentleman knows, we've inherited a huge mess with large backlogs which aren't easy to clear.
Jonathan Brash.
Madam Speaker, can I associate myself with the comments of the member for Boston and Skegness, who has eloquently described how it used to work under the last Labour government? In fact, on the last day of 2010, the number of people on an asylum waiting list was around 14,000. In June of this year, the asylum caseload was 224,000. That's 16 times higher. The brass neck, frankly, of the Conservative Party to come here to criticise us is genuinely breathtaking. And given that we have now got 3 of the largest deportation flights in British history off the ground in 4 months, will the Minister agree that although there is far more to do, the plan is working?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it's tough and hard and difficult, and in order to be successful it requires international cooperation, cross-border, both operationally and politically and diplomatically, and we are doing that.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yesterday, the Immigration Minister finally replied to my letter after my Datchet constituents were given next to no notice about single adult males being housed at the Manor Hotel. She said the numbers housed there could reach as high as 85 and gave no indication for how long they would be there, in breach of her manifesto commitments. Can she now give my constituents in Datchet a concrete timetable for when the misuse of the Manor Hotel will come to an end?
Madam Deputy Speaker, our manifesto commitment wasn't to close all asylum hotels within 4 months of being elected.
Mark Seward.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it is truly astonishing to hear the Conservatives come here today to defend their Rwanda policy. 700 million spent on 4 deportees. That's 175 million for each deportee. You could have purchased, they could have purchased, a 5-star hotel for each of them. Surely the Minister agrees with me that this money is far better spent on intelligence, enforcement and, of course, processing to get the backlog that we inherited down.
I certainly do agree, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm sure that the vast majority of members accept that the new government have inherited a complete and utter shambles of an asylum system, and they are having to clear up another area of Tory mess. Part of that clearing up that Tory mess is sorting out and processing promptly asylum applications. So would the Minister please advise us how she's doing that, give us more insight into that, but also, as an area that had asylum hotels imposed on it by previous Tory government, how will you be avoiding principal holiday accommodation areas for any further hotels? Thank you.
Well, we certainly are having to get the system back up and running from a virtual standing start, as the honourable gentleman rightly points out. And that means that we've been able, as I said earlier, to go up from processing only 1,000 asylum claims a month to nearly 10,000 a month. For those who are through the whole system and have a grant, for example, that they then need to exit our asylum accommodation, and that allows us to backfill and in the end allows us to exit hotels. But this isn't an instantaneous answer when the system has ground to a halt and we have to redeploy resource and get it up and running again.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's worth remembering that when this government came to office, we were in the middle of the worst year ever for small boat crossings, 6% higher than the previous record year, which was 2022. That, I'm afraid, was the legacy of chaos and failure that the party opposite left behind. While there's still a long way to go in tackling the crossings, does the Minister welcome the fact that the total arrivals so far this year are 20% down on 2022?
Minister.
I welcome any progress, but I also recognise the seasonality of arrivals, and I'm not here to tell the House, unlike the last government, that there are any quick or easy solutions to this difficult problem. We are getting the system up and running. We've created the Border Security Command to start disrupting and degrading the gangs that are smuggling people across the Channel. We will assert the right of the rule of law to exist and get our asylum system working so that we can stop these dangerous crossings. But I can't stand here and say there's an easy magic wand to wave. It will take hard, cross-jurisdictional, cross-country work, and that is what the Border Security Commander has been appointed to do. That's what the extra £150 million of resource given to that job is there to do. That's what our operational and National Crime Agency people are there to do, and that's what they're doing.
Jim Allister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've heard today that since this government came to office, there have been over 19,000 illegals come in the small boats. Does the Minister have any figures as to the influx of illegals and others who are coming into the United Kingdom from the Republic of Ireland, where there are no checks? Has she got those figures? And on the question of hotels, how can my constituents judge her manifesto pledge to reduce the number of hotels? And to help them do that, would she undertake to publish for each constituency on a monthly or bi-monthly basis the number of hotels in use and the number of illegals being accommodated within them?
No, Madam Deputy Speaker, the previous government didn't do that either for a safeguarding and public safety reason, as the honourable gentleman knows.
Kevin Benavia.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's rather galling for the Right Honourable Member for Stone to protest about hotel being used in his constituency when that is clearly the result of a backlog created by his own party in government, wasting hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money on gimmicks they knew would never work. Surely, my right honourable friend would agree with me, the right answer is better and faster processing, which is fairer for those seeking asylum, fairer for those in communities that have our hotels being used for this, and fairer for the taxpayer as a whole.
I agree with my honourable friend, Madam Deputy Speaker, and of course the right honourable gentleman knows only too well that the same hotel was open from the 21st of November 2022 to the 8th of February 2024, and he didn't complain in this House about it then.
Jim Shannon.
Speaker, to thank the Minister for the answers. Can the Minister outline what safety procedures are in place to ensure that there are additional community policing around those areas and those hotels where there are literally hundreds of single men descending on small hotels and communities? There is a safety issue, I think all of our constituents across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain deserve to have that reassurance. Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there's a safeguarding and safety issue going in both directions. I see reports of asylum seeker service users being attacked and injured, as well as attacks in the other way in a small number of cases. So we always liaise with the local police and local authorities. We take also an intelligence-led approach to see if there's outside agitation or difficulty, and we're in constant contact with both local services and our service providers to ensure the safety of service users and local populations.
Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Minister for her statement, and I make my response to it within the context of my register of interests. I can only agree with her on Rwanda. Not only was it an inhumane shambles, it's something that's brought shame and ridicule to our country, and I'm glad to see the back of it. I welcome her commitment to bring dignity and respect to the immigration system, and also the acceptance of the way the hotels were being operated are a big part of that. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation recently published a report called Destitution by Design. It was authored by Professor Beth Watts-Cobb, who is a researcher at iSphere in my constituency. This makes absolutely clear the human impact of the so-called hostile immigration policy operated by the last government and the impact it had on real people in our country. I'd like to ask the Minister if she's aware of this report, and if she's not, will she commit her or one of her staff speaking to Professor Watts-Cobb about its findings? Thank you.
I'm happy to check the report out, and I'll write to the Honourable Gentleman.
Sam Carling.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm very grateful to the Minister for coming here today to set out those measures that this government is taking to deal with the issue. I also share colleagues' amazement at the sort of newfound concern members opposite have for this. Because under the Conservative government, this time last year, I'm not sure why the Honourable Gentleman was heckling, we had more than 400 hotels and more than 21,000 hotel rooms in use for asylum seekers this time last year under the last government, and spending £8 million per day on hotels. Does the Minister agree with me that while the party opposite were apparently happy with that, this government is not and is taking those steps to deal with their mess?
I thank my honourable friend for his observations, and clearly we have to begin from the situation we find when we come into office, Madam Deputy Speaker, and in this case it was a system in chaos with a Rwanda scheme that was unworkable, massively expensive and a distraction, which had meant that no processing of all the asylum claims that had arrived from March 2023 was happening. So we have a huge backlog. We've had to switch the system, divert resources from a failed Rwanda scheme into processing and also into the Border Security Command, so we can deal with the causes of this problem rather than pretend that it doesn't exist.
We now come to the statement, and I will give the front benches a short amount of time to